Okay, in this tutorial I'm going to show you guys how to shotgun your way through Substance Painter to do low-res, high-res. So I'm going to be doing this as quickly and efficiently as possible. This video might be a little bit long because it is technically an intro to Substance Painter. Okay, so I'm looking at a general side view of some geometry, and I'm going to talk about some rules of the road. You guys will be modeling things, maybe it'll be a box or something like that, and you're going to do a high-res, low-res version, right, for Substance Painter. Well, here's the deal. It is not advisable, although you can get away with it in a certain technique I will explain later, but is it not advisable to have any angle on your geometry be 90 degrees or more for the low res with only two edges? Okay. So you can see this is not a good idea for the low res. This is not a good idea for the low res. Look at that angle, right? So 90 or less, so to speak. You know, when you look, say, a cute angle. We want to go back to high school here. So not a good idea. Even right here, this is not a good idea to be the low res, and then of course smooth the edges of this and make that the high res. This has to do with, I talked about before, which is normal. It's going to be the search index window when you're doing the bake from the low res to the high res. I talked about how when you take a look at the edge actual normals of an object, like here's a box that's, you know, very faceted with a blending mode of, or I'm sorry, a normal. If I go over here to modeling here, we talked about this before. But if you go over here to mesh display, set, you know, soften harden edges, you know, set to 0. Basically what that means is you're going to see this. You're going to see normal edges like this. Now that's all fine and dandy. But if you're going to put a high res that you're going to bake, right, that has a smooth edge like this, you know, so this is terrible drawing, by the way. So imagine there's like another edge there, right? So that's my high res, right? So the high res is there, and what's going to happen is with the way that low the low poly mesh and the high poly mesh bake the normal off to make a high poly mesh look like it's really there on the low poly mesh, is what it does is it goes and it takes a search index via centimeters out according to the normal's direction. So if you have an actual low res, it's going to search out like this, which is going to go out like this, a certain length that you decide in centimeters or percentage of. Okay, and then it's going to go backwards. So it's going to go, I'm going to change the color here. It's going to do the reverse this way. What the heck? Mark, you piece of crap. Okay, so it's going to search this way. Okay. Problem with this is you're going to get a blind spot. It's not going to be able to pick up that one edge that you created here. This area will be like, just like when you're driving, it'll be like a blind spot. And this will be a blind spot. This will be a blind spot. This will be a blind spot. This will be a blind spot, and this will be a blind spot. This will be a blind spot. This will be a blind spot. So it's all based off of searching out according to the actual Vertex normals. Okay, so what you'll end up getting if you have a low res with two faces and it's 90 degrees or more, when you do that, is you're going to get, when you render it inside of Substance Painter or inside of Unreal, when you get it in Unreal, is you're going to get an edge. I'll kind of show it off here just so you can see it. And the whole point of low res, high res is to make it look like that this edge is actually smooth and has a nice smooth edge. You'll get something like this. It'll give like artifact where you see like 3 double lines. Okay, and that's not what you want. Okay, kind of hard to explain. I know we haven't gone into baking yet, but here's the general rule that you guys should apply, at least for now. There is a workaround to this, but it's so annoying. It's basically you can't have seams, which is kind of annoying. So here's the workaround. Say you have an edge, say you have something like this, or something like this, or something like this. And I'm really concentrating just on the top right corner for now. This is 90 degrees. This is, again, acute angle, acute angle. what do I do? Well, for the low res, what I would do is I would actually bevel the edge. Okay, you'd probably bevel all these edges. This is for the low res, not the high res. Okay, so don't do this, just do this. Don't do this, don't, you know, do this. So in other words, if we take a look at this now, let me go back to my grease pencil here. And say, you know, here's the normals direction. Let's go ahead and take a look. And here's the normals direction, right? Here's that blind spot. Here's that blind spot. Well, what about this? What's the reality of this whole situation? Well, you have a normal that's averaged here, here, and here, and here. So the searching will actually go out this direction, and it will actually collect the blind spot. It'll actually get the blind spot here and here. When you do the bake, when the low res, because the low res will be on top of the high res. Okay, this is kind of, you guys are all probably like, what the heck is he talking about? Well, don't worry, we're going to get to that. Okay, so let me go over here. Same thing here. This is, again, just anything like this. This is probably the best example right here. All right, on this side, if we left it as is, okay, let me go ahead and just show you. Again, here is the Vertex Normals, right? These are, you know, individual. It's going to search out. It's going to search in for the geometry, the high-res geometry, and it's going to print that high-res onto the low-res. You're going to get a blind spot. You're going to get a blind spot. Here, this probably will be averaged, and hence it's going to get the blind spots in and out. Okay, there is a way where you can get away with using, say, this as your low res, okay, and then have a beveled edge for your high res, right, of all these beveled. And the only issue is these have to be seamless. The edges have to be seamless, meaning you can't have the edges of the sharp angles that are 90 degrees actually attached in their UVs. They have to be, like, basically, in this case, what are we talking, like six complete independent squares in the UV space that are not actually connected. Well, that's kind of a waste when you think about it, because it's like, what if you want to paint a cross or something like that? So we're going to get into that. A lot of this stuff, okay, you're kind of going over your head. I get it. So let's go ahead and jump back to our previous tutorial that I showed you guys. And here she is. And we laid out the UVs nicely. It's nice, the UVs are all set up nicely. Now, here's again what I would do to keep myself from going insane. I could come in here. There's two solutions for this. Okay, I'm going to design my high res. If I do that, I have to make sure that none of these edges here. Just go ahead and show you. Every single one of these edges has to be cut. Let's go ahead and cut it. All right. And they all have to be, get UV shells here, and I'm going to go ahead and do the layout. And they're all separated by a little bit of padding, very important. Probably use a little bit more padding than that. And this is the rule of the land. Oops, I forgot this. So I'll grab this, cut. Anything with a 90-degree angle, okay, that's going to have like a smooth edge on the regular one. You got to actually, oops, I'm going to go ahead and lay it out here. It has to be separate with some padding in between. Sounds ridiculous, right? Yeah, I know, it's kind of dumb. What's the solution for all this? Let me undo all this. Okay. And here we are back to square one. What's the solution for this? Well, to save yourself the headache of getting weird artifacts for your normal bake for your low res versus your high res, is honestly I would just come in here, come to the edges that are actually obviously 90 degrees or whatever. 90, this is actually acceptable. You can get away with this. This is, what do they call that? An obtuse angle, right? All right, it's not acute. That's actually going to work. Because if you think about it, the normals, it's going to get into those areas. It's even better if it was this, actually. You can get away with no beveling needed. But if you have something like this, 90 degrees, or anything else like that, it's probably best to bevel it at least once. Now, beveling is considered in game design like kind of like a no-no, don't do it. But we got high enough poly count. The computers are fast enough to deal with at least getting a bevel. Bevels are healthy anyway, because even in game and also film, it makes it look so much real, because regular highlights roll off nicely. They don't have this heavy contrast between the two. So I'm grabbing all these edges. Notice I'm not grabbing these edges. Okay, so I'm going to come in here and actually bevel this. So I'll go Edit Mesh Bevel. You might have to do one area at a time. So here I did a bevel. And here you can see under my attribute editor, I can change the fraction. So how sharp you want this is totally up to you. You can go really skinny if you like. I'll go ahead and do it like right there. And then, of course, notice that their smoothing angle is set to 30. You can actually increase this all the way up to 90 if you wish, or if you really want to smooth that angle out, you can. Let's take a look at what that looks like now. So I'm going to go ahead and do shading, use default material. You see that nice fall off? I mean, I don't have any lights in the scene. You see how we have a nice transition here? Like I said, everything in the real world is actually beveled. Nothing in the real world has this nasty straight edge or whatever, where it's like, you know, for what it is. And you can also take this and go Mesh Tools, you know, soften, harden edges. I usually put this at a 30 and hit apply. And you get a nice result. This is a solution for your low res. Okay, so you don't have to deal with actually separating the UVs in here to get this to work right. Okay. So if this is my low res, to be quite honest, I don't know what else I would need to do to smooth this out even more. To be quite honest, it's boxes. I could bevel it one more time if I want. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and grab this, and let's get a little crazy with this. Let's pretend, find my bevel here, and I'm going to go ahead and just be a little bit more dramatic. And let's say it's something very, very, very boxy like this, right? Okay. And you got to be, if you take a look at your UVs, you might, in the bevel process, you might actually screw up your UVs, believe it or not. In this case, these look pretty clean, but if they don't, come in here, go to your UV shells, right click, unfold, unfold. You can already see something happen there, right? And that's because it's kind of distorting it to the best of its ability. Now, how do I kind of get this stuff to kind of smooth out so it's not so jaggedy? Well, you can come in here and do optimize. That helps a little bit, but optimize actually, don't do that. No, that's smoothing the edges. Don't do that. All right, so I would do probably, I talked about this before, straighten UVs, option box, and you can do, let's try 20. Let's see if we can kind of straighten that out. There we go. So you can see it's straightened everything out nice. If you feel there's something weird going on, you know, get in there and move a UV or something. You know, take a look for overlap. I think it looks pretty nice though. Let's go ahead and turn on use shader material and just check, make sure everything looks nice. There's no weird distortion in the lettering. Okay. Now, my high res is going to be even more smooth than this. Okay, so if I turn on shading, use default material, you can see, you can just take a look at it. It's pretty smooth, but it's not that smooth. So I want to do a high res version. So what I usually do is obviously make sure, what I always like to do is do modify. You know, I got the UVs laid out. Modify freeze transforms. Always a good save to make sure it's zeroed out. Modify center pivot. Make sure the pivot's at the center. And then edit delete by type history. So you get all the history out. Those are the big threes. Once you've done that, you now have this. So I'm going to go ahead and take this, duplicate it, and put this guy off to the side. Oops, something happened there. I think, oops, yeah, modify, center pivot, there we go. I'm going to hit Control D, move this over here. I'm going to call this first one, I don't know, stair underscore low res, LR. This one, actually I'll call this one low LR. I'll call this one staircase LR. And I'll call the high res, which I'm about to work on, staircase underscore, big time on these underscores, HR. We're going to use these suffixes, prefixes to help us out inside of Substance Painter. So I'm going to take the high res and I'm going to go to town on this puppy. I'm going to go in here and do another bevel. I want this really smooth. Edit mesh bevel. And again, I probably would only choose, whatever. You can go crazy with this, and it doesn't matter if the UVs get polluted. As you bevel stuff, you'll notice UVs get all messed up. So just go crazy with the high res. So I'm going to go bevel, and let's see here. Turn on wireframe on shaded. See what we get. So we got this going on. It's getting a little faceted. So I'm going to take go into my attribute editor here. I'm going to take the fraction, pull it up until I get really smooth edges like that. I'm probably only going to do, let's do segment 2, whatever, it's fine. So I don't want to see any weird artifacts or nothing like that as I do this. Let's take a look at the UVs. The UVs are probably getting messed up. You can see they're even overlapping now. Don't worry. Who gives a crap about the actual UVs on the high res? Okay, so I'm going to take this and go edit, delete by type. History looks nice and good. We don't want to see geometry like getting weird on us. I'm going to come in here and do a really nice job. The normals, soften up the normals really good because I have such a transition here. And I'll go ahead and put this maybe at like 40 or something. There we go. Let's see how it looks. Turn off the wireframe and move around it, because guess what? This is what you're going to get when you bake the final look. It's going to look even better than this. So you can see this is what it is. Let me go ahead and this still feels a little faceted. You can kind of look up to it. Let's play around a little bit. So I'm going to go under here and go soften harden. Let's go ahead and try something crazy like 104. Let's see if we get a nice smooth transition. I don't think we're ever going to get it, but it looks pretty good. All right, so this is our low res or high res. I'm going to take the low res version and zero it out again. These need to be on top of each other. I can't stress that anymore. Okay, let's take a look at these two together. Okay, so one is high res and one is low res. Okay. So I want to have that look of the high res baked into the low res in a normal map, which actually is going to give itself away on the silhouette. I'm going to be able to see this two-edge sharpness here, but when I look straight on, I'm actually going to see this smoothness. That's a trick in video games that makes normal maps, that makes things look amazing inside of video games, because it's a trick. It's a trick of making a low res look high res by using a red, green, and blue map called a normal map, which kind of fakes a bumpiness and so forth and alters the real object, which gives you this kind of reality. So let's talk about how do we decide the distance of basically the baking process. Well, before we do that, let's just go ahead and export these out. So what's important is these are both on top of each other. What I find is what my students do is they leave this one over here. They need to be sitting in a 3D space on top of each other, almost like in parallel universes. So staircase low res, I'm going to do File, Export Selection, and we're going to export OBJ Export. Actually, no, we're going to choose Fbx. So Fbx Export. If you find that Fbx is not showing up, go into your Setting Preferences Plugin Manager and turn on Fbx. Where are you at, you punk? Somewhere around here. Where? Oh, there it is. Fbx Maya. Just put loaded auto load. Sometimes it's not on. You got to turn on. Okay, so what's important is that each one of these pieces of geometry are assigned to one single material. That's very, very important. So what I usually do is I'll grab this. It doesn't matter what it's assigned to. I'll do assign new material and just assign to anything. It could be a Fong, a Lambert. So they're both one material. So now I'm going to take the low res and we're going to export it out FBX. Okay. So export selection, and I'm going to put this to my UV test folder here, and I'm going to call this my low, right? And hit export. It's going to give me this annoying message here saying smoothing groups were unsupported and blah 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 blah. Don't worry about it. FBX did bring the smoothing groups over. We'll talk about that later. And then here's the high res, which is totally messed up. All the UVs are terrible and so forth. I'm going to do one thing with the high res. I'm going to go ahead and create polygon sphere. And we're going to be a little playful here. You can actually put pieces of geometry down, almost like if they're rivets. This is some extra fun you can do. Oh my gosh. I'm going to be here all night. Let me hit F to frame here. Okay. So I'm going to actually do that. Make a couple rivets. Whatever, right? And I'm going to take those two rivets and grab the HR, the high res, and I'm going to do mesh combine. Okay, and then I'll just go ahead and say edit delete by type history quick. We're going to get rid of those stupid nodes. And I'll rename this staircase high res. So we have this low res and we have this high res. Okay, so we got this. So let's go ahead and export this. So file, export selection. You know, all terrible UVs, big mess for the high res. Fbx Export. And we're going to do high. Okay. So both of those are exported. They're on top of each other. And we're going to actually do some baking. Okay, so let's jump into Substance Painter. Okay, so this is Substance Painter. And it may look a little daunting at first, but it's actually very simple. So the first thing we're going to do is File, New. And we're going to first go ahead and choose PBR Metallic Rough High Quality. PBR Metallic Quality, Metallic Roughness basically deals with a base color, metallic, roughness map, normal map, height map. That's usually the 5 big components. And PBR meaning physically based rendering. In other words, kind of like a photoreal way of working. So for the mesh, we're going to go ahead and hit select. And I'll go ahead and choose low. And that's the low res mesh. We're not going to do create a texture set per UDIM file because we would have 0 to 1, 0 to 2 space, 0 to 3 space. We don't have that. It's just a 0 to 1 space. Directx or Opengl, depending on if you're going to Unreal 4. The difference is the normal map's green channel is inverted. It's not a big deal. Directx is what we would do for, say, going to Unreal. The document resolution is at 2048. You can change this intermediately throughout the whole process. You can actually go from 2048 to 49.6. It actually, every single paint stroke that you do is recorded, and you could project those paint strokes by moving to 49.6. If your computer is really slow, video card sucks, you'll probably be at 2048, and if you're really bad, you'll go to 1024. So you can switch this at any one time. I'm going to leave it at 2048 for now. I would prefer you guys to do 4096, depending on the size of your props. If you have very small little forks and so forth, I wouldn't do anything higher than 2048. Import mesh normal map bakes. If you did a high-res bake from a high poly mesh from ZBrush, you could add it in here if it's a normal map. So that's okay. We'll leave this be and hit OK. Now, inside the material area, you can kind of come over here. If you hold down Alt and left mouse drag, you can move it around just like in Maya. We can see that hard faceted edge there. If I hold down Shift, right mouse button, hold, and drag left and right, I can actually move the light around, as you can see here. And so we're going to bake the normal map so that this edge doesn't look sharp. It will actually be a deception. It'll actually look smooth. It will give itself away at the silhouette. As you can see, we have 2 edges here. This is a trick to have low poly count, but actually make it look like it's very high poly. So if you find this tab, it's called Texture Set Settings. It could be up here, wherever. I have it down here. The size of the actual texture sets that we're going to bake is 2048. You can actually set this to 49.6 if you wish, or whatever. So let's go ahead and bake. So I'm going to go ahead to the Bake Textures option here. And you can see all these, what are called additional maps. Now to bake a high res to low res, we're going to turn off, check mark all these guys. And let's go ahead and see. Now we're actually looking at the commons. If you click on normals, you can see there's no options. If I go to commons, this is sort of the settings. What's the output size of the texture? You probably want to actually print this at 4096. Dilation width has to do with the padding that we did, and it's actually going to smear the edges, which is something that we need. So we'll leave that at 1. Some people will put this to 2 or 3.
if you remember, our padding was something around 9 or 10 pixels. Let's keep going here. You don't necessarily have to have a high-res mesh. If you have a very smooth model as a low-res, you don't have to have it. You can just click on this and say use your low poly mesh as a high poly mesh. So it's going to compare the low poly to the low poly, and you're not going to really get any difference. In this case, we want to actually bring in a high poly, so I'm going to click here, and I'm going to choose high. So here's the high poly mesh. Cage file stuff, I'm going to talk about that. Dan and I are going to talk about that a little bit later, how that can be important using cages. So not only would you create a low res and a high res, but you actually create a cage in Maya. Sounds a little confusing, but we'll get into that later. Max frontal distance, max rear distance. This has to do with the search index window from you searching outward and searching inward, as we talked about earlier. This is all based on centimeters. We're going to turn off relative to bounding box, because that's going to be based on the percentage of the size. And now we're going to be judging everything by centimeters. So the max frontal distance is set to 0.01 centimeters right now, and the max rear distance is set to 0.01, okay, which is pretty low. If we bake this, we'll just go ahead and bake it, and I'll show you the artifacts that we're going to see. Actually, let's first get the numbers. The average normals will take the low-res mesh and average the normals to like 180. It's basically softening the normals on the low-res, even though the low-res mesh you can see is probably like 60 when we smoothed it. It's still going to average it. Ignore backface. That has to do with backfaced issues where it, searches back and actually searches through something. We're going to go ahead and put this by mesh name. It's going to mash by mesh name. So you could have multiple meshes that are assigned the same material. And if you recall, we actually had underscore HR, and this will be underscore LR. So it's going to be looking at the meshes. Sorry. I'm going to put this super sampling to 2 to 2, subsampling. And now let's get the front and the max numbers. We're going to go back into Maya. And I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to create a measuring tool, distance tool. I'm going to make sure snap to point is on. I'm going to make sure wireframe on shaded is on. And I'm going to go ahead and snap a couple points. 1, 2. I'll just click the move tool so I can get out of it. I'm going to take these two locators. You can see it creates two locators and a distance tool. Take the two locators. I'm going to scale those down. I like them nice and small. All right, so let's go off the X-ray here. And still keeping my snap to point on, I'm going to snap this right about here. And then I will go ahead, hit X-ray, and grab the other locator. I think they're on top of each other. Yes, they are. Okay. So I'm going to move it up. So I need to do the frontal, which says I got to go as high as this value, which is 0.98. Okay. Kind of bring this down here. If I don't put that value and I put it too low, it's going to truncate this. It's actually going to capture this and only capture the half, so it'll almost look like it's a tree trunk that's been cut. I'm going to grab these two locators. I'm going to move them over here and over here. I'm going to F to frame. It's always good to hit F to frame when you're working with this because it'll drive you nuts. Let's go with the rear distance. So I'm kind of putting this here, and I'm going to take this value, put this down. How far do I got to go in? Probably not as far as like 0.16 or something, 0.23. So we kind of established the values. Let's go into substance, and I'm going to put the value here to I think it was 0.1 if I'm not mistaken. No, I'm sorry, is it 1? Whatever, 1.0. This one we'll put to 0.4. Just for the heck of it, we'll go a little bit over. And this is, I'll put this 1. There we go. All right, so let's go ahead and do our bake. Again, we're only baking the normal map, and then when we create the normal map, it actually uses the normal map and creates these maps. We're going to talk about these in a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and say bake Lambert 13. This is based on the material that I assigned inside of Maya. Go ahead and hit enter. Notice there's only, in my texture set list, there's only one texture set here. If I had multiple meshes, you'd see multiple pieces here. And voila, as you can see, things look, or deceptively look, smooth. So you can take a look. We do have an artifact down here, I don't know why. But it looks smooth, right? That's a deception. If we take a look along the silhouette, you can see we only have 2 edges right here. But facing straight on, normal maps are deceptive, and they're meant to convince you that it's high res. Now here, it's not really as exciting and 3-dimensional as what we had, but you can see how this can become useful. Hold down Shift right mouse button and drag left and right, as you can see. Now, if I came in here, we could rebake this at any one time. I'll go back to Bake Textures, and we'll just rebake the normal map. This time I'm going to take the max frontal distance and put it to a value of 0.01. And I'm going to bake it. Now keep your eye right here. Do you see what happened? It truncated the information. It didn't reach up high enough to grab those circles. So I'll go ahead and do bake again. And let's go ahead and bring it up to 0.1. You're going to start to see it slowly build up. And it looks like it hit it right about there. Let me go ahead and bake again here. And if I do like 0.05, let's see what we get when we do that. Probably going to cut off halfway. There you go. So you can see what's going on here. If I go ahead and click here, I'm just going to put this to a value of like 0.2 or whatever, you know. Max rear distance, 0.4. And we'll just go ahead and bake again. It just rewrites the file over and over again. So you can see here in the texture set list, I can actually turn off and on the actual UV layouts. You can have multiple meshes in here, by the way, as long as they're assigned to the same Lambert material. Okay. So if you take a look in the texture set settings, the current texture set we have selected, think of texture sets as sort of like geometry. So here we have texture sets, and we have a normal map. And now it's in the normal map slot. I can actually get rid of that by hitting this X. Keep your eye on the geometry as I do this. You'll see the trick of the normal map. See that? Silhouette looks the same. If I go over to my project setting, you can see the baked map that I created. And I'm going to go ahead and drag that, left mouse drag, and put it back in the select normal map. So this is going to be used in combination with us actually painting normal map information and bumpiness, and we'll bake out to have a high-res look for a low-res geometry that'll be fast and interactive inside of Unreal. Okay, so let's talk turkey on these other maps. What are these other maps all about? Well, we'll get into those in a minute. We're going to get in, start baking those. Let's go ahead and come back to our bake texture. We did our normal map, and I'm going to do a world space. I'm not going to do ID. We'll do ambient, curvature, and we'll go position. Now, some of these, you can see if you go to world space, has a couple other options, no parameters there. Ambient occlusion has a secondary rays, occlusion distance. This has to do with the distance of the shadows. Curvature has to do with curvature maps. And we can talk about details and all that. We can change that up in position. So we're going to leave all those as default and bake these puppies. So you have to have these textures baked to use generators, which we're going to get into. So it's baking all textures. You can see them being printed in my projects folder. Ta-da. Now what if I want to take a look at these maps, see what they look like? Well, you can do that by coming under here under viewer settings. Instead of moving this mode to material, you can put it to additional maps. So now we're seeing the printed maps. These are helper maps. You don't really see them or use them in the sense of textures, but they are there. So if I take a look, here's our normal map that was baked. And it may look pretty contrasty here, but this is what gives us that smooth illusion. Let's go to our ID, and we never printed anything, so it's coming up as checkerboard. Let's go ahead and look at our world space. And you can see it's a world space normals. These are used for masking. So for instance, this map is usually commonly used to trigger dust collection on this here, or if the wall was blasted with paint, it would actually go in one direction. Position pass is a gradient XYZ, up and down, left and right. So if you want to have dirt build up at the bottom and then slowly dissipate at the top. Again, they're all to create masks. Thickness, we didn't use that one. You don't want to use that, trust me. It's used for like skin tone stuff. And that's pretty much it. Ambient occlusion, you'll notice that it creates a shadow pass that has to do with crevices. So areas that are occluded, like this area here, which is concave, and this area that's around the sphere, it collects a nice little shadow. I can rebake the distances of the shadow fall off here by going back into Bake Textures. And I'm going to go ahead and just play with my ambient occlusion. I baked all these others. I'm going to go ambient occlusion. And you can see I could set the secondary rays, max occlusion distance, up a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and bake. So I'll do a bake texture here. Watch the shadow. Keep your eye on the shadow over here. And it's going to take a little longer because it's actually got to print out a little bit further. You can see it's a little bit thicker, but it's actually spread out a little bit more. So it's really about the distance, the max distance, meaning how far is that fall off of that shadow going to go. I usually leave it by default. You don't have to change it or nothing like that. So these are all maps that are going to be used to create shadows. Like for instance, this black area will be used as a masking to allow for dust to collect in these areas, okay, because it's kind of signifying this. I'm going to go back to Material, and here you can see the combination of our occlusion and our normal map and everything. So the occlusion map, if you want to see it a little bit better, because it's sort of overlaid by itself, is you can come over here and you can play with, let's go to Viewer Settings, and you'll see that we have this thing called Parallax Occlusion Mapping, and you can just leave that be. And we're going to go ahead and come over here and hit the take a look here, see if I can find it. It's always hard to find. I don't know why it's such a pain in the rear end to find here. Here it is. So shader parameters is under viewer settings, shader parameters, comedy parameters, AO intensity. So I can bring that up and down. You can see that opacity that is being multiplied over our reality here. And this is an actual texture pass that you'll bring into you'll bring in. So this will be ambient occlusion pass, as you can see, is going to be brought into Unreal. It's going to be an extra shadow pass. So just for the sake of viewing, you can actually put this up all high or really low or whatever. It's kind of what it is. So you have this nice shadow in here and here, usually in the concave areas. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of working inside here. We have our smooth edges. Let's go ahead and take a look at the environment that we're currently using for this. So what I'm going to do is, and you could also come in here and turn on wireframe if you want. See the low res. And we can also come over here. Let me just show you really quick. Let's kind of come up here and go over here to Viewer Settings, Environment Opacity. I'll bring that up, and then I'll take the Environment Blur, bring that down. So you actually render things with these HDRIs, High Dynamic Range Images. And if you go under Materials, not Materials, I'm sorry, Environments, these are all different HDRIs. I can literally drag these in. They're 360 environments that you can move by holding down Shift, right mouse button, and drag left and right. Now, it's not very interactive in here, but if you go ahead and hit this little iRay button, which is a little camera, you can pop into iRay. This gives you almost like a Maya render of your final result. It's using the environment to be seen in here. So it's reflecting in the scene and so forth. I can hold down Shift and right mouse button and drag. I can actually change my environment map over here to any one of these. So I can choose like a forest. You can see the color of the green and so forth. You can also use these nice little studio lights if you want one solid light coming in from one direction. You could also use like this. This is like up in the sky. Pretty cool stuff. So you get a full render here with shadows, which is kind of nice. So this gives you an idea if you're going to be rendering inside of Maya. Also kind of a preview look of what it'll look like inside of Unreal. See, these edges are still pretty harsh, and you know, that's something we could have done with the high res, smooth the normals a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and click this camera off. Whenever you go in iRay, this is you never close it down. Very dangerous. You'll close the program. You go to the little camera and you turn it off and on. So I'm turning it off and on. See that? Just clicking the camera. Just the camera. Okay, so let's go ahead and come in here and start doing some paint work. Okay, first off, if I want to see the different maps, I kind of showed you this last time, you can hit the letter C as in cat. We haven't colored any base color yet. We haven't done any height information yet, which is black is pushing down, white is pushing out, and gray is staying alone. Roughness, we talked about that. White areas are rough, and black areas will be mirror-like, smooth. Metallic, black is no metallic, meaning plastic, and white is metallic. Normal map, we haven't painted any normal map information yet. And here is the normal plus height plus base normal. We haven't painted any normal yet. We haven't painted any height map yet. But this is the base normal or the baked normal map here. So you're seeing a combination of the three together. And of course base color around. So I'm going to go ahead and hit M for material and pop back to that. So that's material mode. So, you know, just to see all these in here, viewer settings, you got solo, additional maps, and material. So we did it. We showed you additional maps, showed you material, and you can click solo and show the different heights. So height, this is what I just showed you, roughness, metallic, and we'll go to base color here. So I'm going to put this back to material, or you can just hit the letter M for material. There you go. Okay, so let's talk about, I'm going to kind of get in here a little bit, and at this point is a good way to stop, but I'm going to go ahead and just show you how you can start painting in here. You have two different types of layers up here. It's very much like Photoshop. You add a layer or fill layer. Fill layer is like everything, so I'm going to go ahead and do a fill layer. Click here, and here's the fill layer. I talked about this before, where when you have a paint stroke, you're not just doing one paint stroke of color, you're doing height, rough, metallic, and normal. So my base color, I'm going to make it red, and it's filling it up with red. The height information channel is being filled. I can make it either rough or shiny. I'm sorry, that's not shiny. Height is raising up and down, a positive number, a negative number. You can see it starts at 0. We'll leave that alone. If I don't want any height, I can actually just turn off height. And I'm just giving color, roughness, metallic, normal. Any data that's below it in layers will inherit whatever's below here. So if there's a height information down here, it'll take that. So roughness, we can increase the roughness or bring it low. You can see the reflection of the clouds as the roughness increases, and then is no clouds, right? So you make it very mirror-like. So this is considered plastic. You want to make this metal, come to metal and make it metal. See the difference? It's a little bit darker, kind of has a metallic look to it. You can take the base color and jump over to orange or whatever. So now it's very golden. And normal, we're not doing normal. We can paint normal map stuff in here. I'll just turn that off. So this is it. Look at that. Wow. Pretty cool, huh? Let's go ahead and jump into iRay real quick. And now you can see the metallic reality. Pretty cool. So the big thing about this program is painting multiple strokes. So I'm going to go ahead and create a, instead of a fill layer, I'm going to choose a layer. Here you can see it comes up as checkerboard. And this is your paint stroke information. We'll get into that in a minute. Scroll down. And I'm going to paint color and roughness. So I'm going to make my color red. Actually, let's make it blue. And I'm going to take my roughness and bring my roughness up very high. So I can go in here, kind of take a look. I can start painting. So if you take a look from the side here, you can see we've lost that reflection. See that? Each of these layers have opacity, but it's not just based on color. So here's the color opacity, right? Just like a Photoshop layer. So I'm removing the color, but the roughness stayed behind. The roughness is on another layer. So if I go to roughness, here it is. And I could take that and take that roughness and bring it down. So we painted, remember we did multiple paint strokes here. We painted color and roughness. And priority, it is on top, but the opacity I can turn off. So if I go back to roughness and to base color, take the opacities down, it's completely gone. So I'm going to go back to base color, go back to roughness, bring those back up. Okay. Now at the moment I can actually jump over and add some height, and I'll put the height up really high. So now I'm painting height. You can see a kind of bumpiness. And once again I can go under the height information and take this to 100 and bring it down. You can see it's bringing the height information down. This is set to linear dodge, by the way. So if there's information down here, it's being added to. Linear dodge is basically addition. We're going to talk about compositing layers and how they are in relationship. So I can add another layer, actual layer itself, on top. You can label these, by the way, by double-clicking. Go back to base color here. And let's go ahead and jump into alphas. Let's choose a really cool alpha. Choose like this handprint here. So I'm going to choose a color of green. And I'll use height information going down, negative. And roughness will put up really high, or just a little bit, not much. You want to make your brush size bigger, you can hold down Control right mouse button and drag. All your brush settings are here, just like in Photoshop. Size, flow, stroke opacity, spacing. Right, so you can go ahead and paint like that. You can see what's going on there. See that? So, pretty cool, huh? All right, so let's talk about, I'm just going to go over really quickly before we end this, masks and so forth and generators. So if you go into materials, you will find a whole bunch of materials here. There's materials and smart materials. Difference is materials are single materials, and smart materials are a combination of materials and generators in a folder. So let's go to materials, and I'll go ahead and take iron diamond, and I'll just left mouse drag it up here and put it above. So now I got this layer in here. You're going to notice it didn't override the height information of the stuff we printed here. Why is that? Well, if we go to the height information, it's currently set to linear dodge, which means it's only going to add information. But if I click this and put this to replace, it'll actually replace whatever this is. So now we have a layer on top that's this crazy look. Now you can make this whatever you want. Copper, fabric, let's try some really cool plastic cabling, whatever. Cobalt, plastic grainy. Let's try plastic grainy. So now we got this interesting texture here. And now I can actually use masks to hide this stuff. The way you do that is you come over here and use a mask, just like in Photoshop. Click there and say add black mask. Now it's gone. And now with this mask selected, not this, but the mask selected, I can come in here and paint and reveal this material. I can hit the letter X to go back and forth between white and black, just like in Photoshop. And of course I can go to my alphas and make try some really cool alphas. So I'll get some dirt grungy alphas here, and now I can go ahead and paint this here and hit X and cover up. So really cool stuff. Again, you got these nice little shapes in here, and you can just reveal that material. And that's it, gang. You can right click these masks and you can actually clear the mask and it'll make it go back to black. Okay. And you can add things like generators. So I'm going to end it with this. I'm going to take this and go add generator. And a generator will use those additional maps right here as drivers for creating details. So I'm going to hit this generator and I'm going to choose this MG metal, the metal edge wear. You can see the edges look kind of eroded on the convex edges. So I'm going to click on that. And now you can see what it's creating is the edges. If you look at that map, and you can go ahead and come in here, and if you hold down Alt and click, you can see the mask that it created to reveal the iron diamond armor. So the white area is being revealed, the black area is not. This is all being driven by the curvature map. So if I want to get out of this, I just click out of this like that, and I come back to the mask. It's a nice way to see what's going on. So it's revealing this stuff here, okay, which is kind of cool. So if I wanted to add to this, I can actually come in here and say add paint. And now if I paint white, I can add more erosion in these areas. See that? So this is actually creating this edge. Now my curvature map isn't perfect. Let's take a look at my curvature map. I'm going to go to my modes, go to additional maps, and let's take a look at the curvature map. Not a fan of this. It actually doesn't make sense because the white area should be the convex edges and the black area should be the concave, which they are, but they're getting this weird transparency. You're getting this white. You shouldn't have this. It's kind of annoying. So what I like to do is rebake my curvature map. So I'll come over here, do bake textures, and let's go to the curvature map. And I'm going to go to my commons, and I'm going to turn off, I'm going to get rid of this low res mesh, high res mesh, and I'm going to turn on use low mesh poly as high poly mesh. And let's go ahead and bake that curvature. So again, I'll just bake it. It's taking the low res, comparing it to the low res, and our map should look a little bit different. Let's see if it is. It's not looking that much. Let's bake it again. Let's make a couple changes here. So let's try the details and let's drag it up really high. And we'll do bake the map. Let's see what happens. Just keep your eye on the map. You see the thickness looks a little different. Let's keep playing with it. Go back curvature. Let's do seams intensity. Let's take that down, see if that helps. And that actually made it worse. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and bake textures, go to curvature. Sometimes enable seams turned off might help. Let's see what that gets. And it didn't help. So let's go back again here. Okay, so enable seams, leave that on. Let's take the pixel details and bring it down real low. Fiddle with these differences. There we go. So we want just white along this edge and black here. I want to make the line a little bit thicker, so I'm going to go ahead and take the curvature map and bring the detail up just a little bit. You could try also a difference between per vertex and per pixel per vertex. I'll just go ahead and bake again. And that's okay. We'll stick with that. So if I hit M for material to go back, you'll notice the generator is actually reading from that line, and hence you can see it's reading it off here. So it's creating this erosion in that area that is considered to be the convex edge. Okay. There's all types of other filters in here, by the way, that you can play with. So I just want to show you the basics of this. There's so much more that you can come in here and do. Like, for instance, I could take this iron, diamond, armor, or whatever, and you could see it's a grayscale here. You could actually drag in a grunge if you want. So I add in a grunge, drop that into grayscale. And oh, that didn't do anything. Let me go ahead and delete these guys. Delete these masks. I'll say clear mask, and let's just put some grunge, drop it in there. Why aren't you working? I think what I need to do is say, let's see here. I think it's add fill. There we need. Okay, so the fill is going to require some information, so let's add these strokes here. There we go. So you can see how you can create all these type of patterns here by dragging in these grunges. So that's a fill. Let's go ahead and play around with it a little bit. Now this stuff works really good, but it's set to UV projection. In other words, it's taking that texture and it's putting it on this 0 to 1 space. So you're going to start to see seams. You see this? You don't want that. So you can do a triplanar projection instead. So I'll put triplanar, and it'll do its best to kind of not create that effect. Not sure why it's not doing it now. That's odd. Go ahead and try this. And it says triplanar. I'm not sure what's going on. But you can kind of see, if you play around with this, you'll start to get used to it. Not sure why I'm still getting a seam. There we go. Oh, nope, no, we're not getting it. Triplanar projection. What's the problem? Hardness. Doesn't look like it's working. That's kind of strange. Should be working fine. Not sure what's going on. Oh well, we'll figure it out. So have fun a little bit, get an idea. And I'm not going to get into it right now. But technically when you're ready to export, you're going to go to export textures. You're going to come over here and choose probably, where's it at here? You should see Unreal. Unreal Engine 4, packed. What this creates is a base color, a map that's a black and white map for red, green, blue, which is occlusion, roughness, and metallic. Right? So you can use RGB and compact all those maps into one RGB map, because they're all grayscale. Normal map and emissive. We don't have an emissive in here. That's another really cool thing that you can create. For instance, if I come in here, I'm going to show you some really cool stuff here. I don't want to get too crazy, but under texture set settings, we're currently base color, height, roughness, metallic, normal, right? I can come plus here and make, it's off the screen here, but I'm going to type emissive. So emissive is kind of cool in the sense that if I come in here and make a layer, get a fill layer, and oops, I don't want a fill layer, sorry. I want to have a just regular layer. And I'm going to paint, I'm not going to paint color, height, or rough. I'm going to go ahead and paint just emissive. And I'll choose a red color. And you know what, let's do color as well. And I'll do a red color as well. So if I paint this, you're actually creating something that glows in the dark. So if I come over here to the environment exposure, you bring it down, you can see it's glowing in the dark. Pretty cool. If you want to look at things with a little bit of shininess, you can come in here to your emissive intensity and bring it up. See how bright it gets. It's kind of like a preview. It's not necessarily the whole truth. And then under, let's see, display settings, is it? Post effects, turn on post effects, and you can do glare, and I think you can do glare settings. See if I make sure I got it on here. Let's see here, luminance, threshold, where are you? So, just want to make sure we got it on. Oh, we got to turn on, there we go, clip. Alright, so let's take a look, see that shiny glare. Okay, so that's glare, I don't want to have glare down, turn that off. I can turn on anti-aliasing, that gives you a nice effect. Where in the heck is that's luminance, vignette, lens distortion. Maybe it's under viewer settings. I'm trying to remember. And come over here, emissive intensity. Okay, we got that. And what the heck? Okay, so it's under glare, and it's under threshold. So if I bring that up, you get this kind of glow, this crazy star-shaped stuff. You can go ahead and turn this to like bloom, and now you get this kind of fake bloom. But it shows you this kind of fakery of stuff that's in, you know, dark. So this would stuff be glowing inside of, you know, this could be, you know, the pieces of, you know, Stranger Things, the little, anything that's like glow in the dark, like could be the little Christmas lights and so forth. You'd color an emissive for the tips of the Christmas lights and so forth, if you wish. And this would be pumped out as a map. You would take this mesh and these maps that you would create by doing export texture, you know, these maps here, and that you would create using, again, Unreal. Where are you, Unreal? Come in here, Unreal. Oh, gosh. It's late, guys. I'm trying to get through this. Where are you? Unreal Engine 4, there you go. So, emissive, normal, because all there, this bakes out 4 maps, and I will show you what those maps look like. So, you can see where it's located. You could actually choose where it's at, PNGs, 8-bit. I'll go ahead and export those. It's going to pump out the maps. And it says there's some warnings. I'm not worried about it. Open filter. So here's what you get. You get the color, the base color map. You get the emissive. These are areas that are glow in the dark. This is your normal map, which is the combination of your height map that we printed and our baked normal map. And this actually is looking weird because it's actually a grayscale RGB value of the height, of the metallicness, blah, blah, blah. And this all plugs into Unreal, which I can show you next time. So that's pretty much it. I'd like to show you in future examples. I'll probably make a video showing you how to do a bad bake using those sharp edges so you know what the artifacts look like. But this should be plenty for you to play with. I haven't even got into stencils yet. Stencils are a whole nother reality besides painting on here You can actually come into these other modes here, such as stencil. See if I can jump into it, or projection mode, sorry. And you could actually bring in a stencil in here if you wish. So if you come over here and take the shape and do something like, let's see here, am I in the right mode here? Projection, losing my mind. Okay, so yeah, projection mode, and we should see a stencil operation here. Where's the stencil at? It's not on here. That's weird. All right. Well, we'll get into this later, and I can tell you how you can paint this and blah blah. Anyway, I'll make another video, but this is a good start for you guys. My video, which I sent you guys the freebie code, kind of goes over all the details of this program.